You know, every single week, literally thousands of people start a faceless online business. They'll launch an anonymous YouTube channel, maybe set up a digital product store, or crank out a nameless content page. And they are absolutely convinced that they have just found the absolute cleanest, most efficient shortcut to online income. But here is the striking reality. 90 days. That's it. That is how long it takes for the vast majority of these folks to just throw in the towel and quit. And the crazy part? They don't quit because the model itself is broken. Not at all. They quit because nobody actually told them what was waiting for them on the other side of that very first upload.
So welcome to today's Explainer. I am so thrilled to have you here. Today, we're going to completely demystify this heavily hyped faceless business trend. We're going to look right past all those flashy promises of overnight wealth and finally reveal the missing pieces of the puzzle. And look, we're not doing this to discourage you. We're doing this because understanding exactly what you're signing up for is honestly the only way you can actually survive it and succeed.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Here is our roadmap for today. We're hitting 1. The faceless illusion, 2. The content treadmill, 3. The psychological trap, 4. The saturation problem, 5. The true income timeline, and 6. The reality check. We are trading in those online guru promises for some structured, undeniable truth.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the faceless illusion and what it actually means. So what exactly is a faceless business anyway? Well, fundamentally, it's an online income model where your personal identity just isn't the product. The brand exists entirely on its own, completely independent of you as a person. We're talking about things like AI-narrated YouTube channels, anonymous niche blogs, or digital product stores on platforms like Gumroad or Etsy, or even print-on-demand operations. And the appeal here, it's incredibly obvious and super compelling. You're essentially separating your income from your ego. You don't need to be camera-ready every day. You don't have this public identity tracking your every single move. If the business fails, well, it feels a lot less personal. And if it succeeds, you get to enjoy that success while feeling totally protected. But here's where it gets super interesting. The stark contrast between what beginners assume and what actually works in the real world. A huge beginner mistake is thinking that faceless simply means invisible and effortless. People will start a channel or open a store, pump out content with zero clear angle, no defined audience, no consistent identity, and then they sit back and wonder why absolutely nothing is growing. But the reality? Every single successful faceless business still has a very strong voice. It demands a consistent perspective, a specific tone, and a recognizable aesthetic. Yes, your physical face is gone, but your underlying identity and your editorial judgment, those absolutely cannot be absent. Actually, scratch that, it's even deeper. Removing your face means you have to work significantly harder to establish trust with your audience, not less.
Which transitions us perfectly into Section 2, the content treadmill. Because guys, this is a volume game.
We really need to shatter this whole illusion of passive income right now. Most of these faceless models, especially YouTube channels and content pages, are relentless volume games. The algorithms out there heavily reward consistency. And this workflow you're looking at, scripting, editing, scheduling, analyzing, and then doing it all over again, it requires you to show up regularly, whether you're in the mood or not. You are definitely not just posting one video and watching the cash roll in from a beach somewhere. It is an active, non-stop treadmill of production. And let's put some real hard numbers on that effort. 4 to 8 hours. That is the actual time cost per video for a beginner who is using AI voiceovers and stock footage. It is far from instantaneous. And hey, if you're a digital product creator, you are spending those exact same hours writing, designing, marketing, and constantly tweaking products that might just sit there untouched for months before you ever see a single sale. And this brilliantly illustrates why people wildly underestimate the work involved here. Because when the income finally does arrive, it looks passive, right? Waking up to a sale notification on your phone does feel like absolute magic. But, as this quote perfectly reminds us, what it actually represents is the delayed labor you put in 3 solid months ago. Labor your brain has probably conveniently forgotten about. My absolute best advice: map out your actual weekly workload in real hours before you even start, and take a hard look at whether you can genuinely sustain that pace.
Moving right along to Section 3, the psychological trap. Why are we so drawn to this?
Just look at the era we live in right now. Personal branding is practically treated as a mandatory requirement. It's camera-heavy, you have to build these exhausting parasocial relationships with total strangers, and honestly, it's draining. For introverts, folks with anxiety, or really anyone who just doesn't want that invasive 24/7 influencer lifestyle, the faceless model feels like a massive breath of fresh air. It's essentially a permission slip to opt out of visibility while still getting to play in the online economy. But make no mistake, it's also a bit of a status game. People crave income that feels sophisticated, something clever and independent that skills quietly without you having to freelance your time for an hourly rate. And that powerful desire is exactly what drives so many people into a business model they don't fully understand yet.
And what compounds that trap even further is what the algorithm is doing to your brain. Every social platform is financially incentivized to show you only the absolute most exciting version of reality. So they show you the guy who made 10,000 pounds in a single month. What they completely hide from you is the reality of the person who made 40 pounds over 6 grueling months and then gave up. Your feed is not a representative sample. It's just attention economics doing its thing. But it trains your brain to expect that the top fraction of a percent is just the normal everyday baseline.
Which brings us to section 4, the saturation problem. Because as more people chase those outliers, we hit diminishing returns. Let's look at how wildly the window of opportunity has shrunk. Just 2 years ago, if you spun up an AI-narrated YouTube channel in some niche topic, you faced very minimal competition. You could grow pretty steadily. But today, there are tens of thousands of those exact same channels. The viewers are way more discerning now, so the crucial point here is that platforms like YouTube aren't just sitting by. They are actively developing ways to identify and completely suppress low-effort AI content. Those old copy and paste strategies, they are completely 100% obsolete.
But listen, this isn't a reason to run away from the model. It's just the sign that you have to enter it differently. To actually survive in this saturated space, you simply cannot just mimic the surface-level thumbnail formats of the big channels. You have to focus heavily on the underlying judgment of what your target audience actually craves. You need a highly specific angle. You need a consistent personality. You have to maintain high editorial standards. And above all, you absolutely have to treat this as a long-term project.
So if we are treating this as a long-term project, what does that actually look like? Let's hit section 5, the true income timeline, and talk about the real numbers.
Let's map out how this actually builds. The hard data paints a very clear picture. For a YouTube channel, just hitting that initial monetization threshold, the 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 watch hours, takes the average new channel anywhere from 6 to 18 months. Not 6 weeks, folks. And even then, monetization usually only really kicks in when you're hitting between 1,000 and 10,000 views per video. If you're doing digital products on sites like Gumroad or print on demand, where you're battling thin margins and algorithms, building a truly consistent monthly income typically takes 1 to 2 full years of active, nonstop marketing and iteration. The model definitely works, for sure, but the timeline is way, way longer than the hype would have you believe.
And this right here is probably the single most important takeaway in this entire explainer. You have got to treat your first 6 months as a research and development phase, not a revenue phase. In this phase, you are learning what clicks. You are building a digital asset. And finding absolute peace with making zero financial return during this time is quite literally the only thing that separates the people who eventually succeed from the ones who rage quit at month 4 because they aren't rich yet.
And that perfectly tees up our final section, the reality check, the unglamorous, gritty efforts behind the scenes.
Look, you simply cannot shortcut the learning curve. You actually have to sit down and properly learn real-world skills. Whether that's video editing, mastering SEO, copywriting, or product design, long before you can ever expect someone to pay you for them. You have to build genuine, undeniable value. And honestly, the absolute hardest part of this entire journey is managing your own psychology during a very long period of very low feedback. Surviving those quiet months of limited data, limited income, and the constant nagging temptation to compare yourself to others who seem to be moving faster, that is the true test of this business model.
Let's bring this all together with one fundamental truth. AI can assist the process, it cannot replace it. The faceless businesses that actually last, the ones generating real, sustainable income over years, they rely on a living, breathing human making real editorial judgments about what an audience needs and then delivering it consistently. It is entirely about operating on consistency and sharp judgment rather than just crossing your fingers and relying on luck or timing.
So I'm going to leave you with this final, provocative thought to chew on. Are you truly prepared to survive a 6-month learning curve of zero financial return in order to build a sustainable faceless income? Because the dark side of this business isn't that it doesn't work, it's just that all the unglamorous, difficult parts have been neatly edited out of the guru's sales pitch. But now that you understand the realistic baseline, you can walk into this with your eyes wide open. And honestly, knowing the unfiltered truth makes this model absolutely worth taking seriously. Thank you so much for joining me on today's explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.